If you look behind the appointment of a trio of MAGA personalities to three of the most critical cabinet posts in our country, the Director of National Intelligence, the Attorney General, and the U.S. Secretary of Defense, if you look behind the headlines that have ensued and the chaos that has been the quick reaction from Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill, and now all the swirling questions in newsrooms around ethics and the confirmation process, what that looks like, a pretty obvious and intentional theme emerges. As Tim Snyder, author of On Tyranny, puts it, quote, taken together, Trump's candidates constitute an attempt to wreck the American government. All three of Trump's most high-profile picks, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, and Matt Gaetz, are defined publicly both by the things they've said in the contempt they have for the role of the departments they're now going to lead, and the views that they have that are in stark contrast to many of the Republicans who have now been asked to vote to confirm them to lead those agencies. We'll start with Tulsi Gabbard, for instance, who has said repeatedly that the West is to blame for the war in Ukraine, an opinion far out of line with the views of America's bipartisan national security experts.
Kamala Harris was in Europe a few days before Putin invaded Ukraine, speaking very clearly and loudly about how Ukraine should become a member of NATO. This was one of the main instigators crossing this red line that Russia, during Putin's reign and before him, has been the red line. And for any objective-minded person, you can understand why they wouldn't want NATO missiles sitting in Ukraine.
So, again, whatever you think of that, you have to look at how it squares with the views of outgoing GOP Senate leader Mitch McConnell and a sizable chunk of his caucus.
By assisting Ukraine today, America is directly demonstrating our commitment to the basic principles of territorial integrity and national sovereignty, changing the calculus for others considering military aggression, and lowering the odds of a far costlier and far more deadly future conflicts in the process.
And then take Pete Hegseth. In his book, he makes it clear that he agrees with Donald Trump when Donald Trump says that our adversaries abroad are not as big of a threat to America as the, quote, enemies within. He writes this, quote, while the post-9/11 generation of patriots spent 2 decades fighting enemies abroad, we allowed America's domestic enemies at home to gobble up cultural, political, and spiritual territory. Leftists stole a lot from us, but we won't let them take this. Time for round 2. We won't miss this war, end quote. So what does it mean for someone who sees Trump's political critics and is now going to be heading the Pentagon as the real threat for that person to now have command and control of the U.S. military? And then there's the curious case of Matt Gaetz, a one-man chaos agent who in the House of Representatives has earned himself near universal contempt and loathing from his own Republican colleagues. David French writes it this way in the New York Times, quote, he was primarily responsible for deposing the House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in a fit of pique, and he so alienated House colleagues that one had to be physically restrained from attacking him on the House floor. He has a reputation for showing colleagues explicit pictures of his sexual partners, and he is under a House ethics investigation into whether he had sex with an underage girl while he was a member of Congress, end quote. In the coming days and weeks, Republicans are going to be asked to confirm appointees who don't agree with their ideological views or priorities and who all the Republicans know are not up to any of the jobs they've been tapped to do. But none of that is the point, is it? Here's how Steve Bannon reacted to the choice of Matt Gaetz as AG.
Matt Gaetz is the fiercest of the fierce warriors. He is the firebrand of firebrands. He's going to hit the Department of Justice with a blowtorch. And that blowtorch is a guy named Matt Gaetz.
I could say a lot of things about Bannon, but at least he says it all out loud, right? And he's been saying it for years. Trump's picks are part of this project that Bannon has described for years now publicly as the destruction of the administrative state, the fulfillment of a vision Bannon has been fighting for years. Here he is making that point earlier today.
We're going to burn some of these institutions down to the ground because you know why? They need to be burned down to the ground.
So we start today. Where else? With some of our favorite reporters and friends. With me at the table, President of the National Action Network, host of MSNBC's Politics Nation, the Reverend Al Sharpton's here. Also joining us, former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Heaphy's here. And joining us remotely, chief political columnist, host of the podcast Impolitic for Puck, MSNBC National Affairs analyst John Heilemann. Also joining us remotely, New York Times investigative reporter Mike Schmidt is here. John Heilemann, I start with you and sort of your body of Bannon reporting. I think Bannon started with this effort, which again was always out in the open, of destroying the administrative state. If I remember the reporting correctly, with a whiteboard in his West Wing office during the short time that he was in the administration. And it may have taken longer to arrive at this, but it seems very intentional that the cabinet picks from Trump are meant to divide newsrooms and send them chasing their tails to see if the ethics investigation into Gates is going to break, or Tulsi Gabbard's comments that even Sean Hannity found offensive are going to get any reaction from the mighty Senate Republicans, or if Hegseth's myriad scandals are going to... I mean, it seems that the sum of the reaction to those is intended to advance the broader project of Bannon's.
Right. Happy Friday, Nicole, if such a thing can be said. I think that the first time that Steve Bannon ever said the phrase, and it actually is the deconstruction of the administrative state, which is the same thing as the destruction of it, but I think the first time he said it out loud to everybody in the world was in February of 2017 at CPAC, where the Trump forces were ascendant at that point. Steve was in the White House at that point, and he was, I think, interviewed on stage at CPAC by Reince Priebus, or at least was on stage with Reince Priebus. But I think it was Priebus talking to Bannon, and Bannon talked about the big priorities in the Trump term. He talked about nationalism in terms of foreign policy. He talked about nationalism in terms of economic policy. And then the third thing he talked about was this deconstruction of the administrative state. And you know, it's the one thing Steve is not only someone who's been saying this out loud forever, through that entire, from the moment they walked in the doors there in January of 2017 until now, when Trump was out of office. He's also someone who is unlike Donald Trump, an extraordinarily well-read and sophisticated thinker. And when I say sophisticated, I don't want anybody to think that means I think he's a good thing in terms of some of these thoughts. But I mean, he is someone who has thought a lot about this stuff. He's read his Lenin, and that's what this is really. It's a Leninist project. And I think to your point, Nicole, I think there's a lot of things going on with these. Some of it is directed at the media, and that's the frame that you were just putting on it, which is to create chaos in terms of how we cover it. But it's also, really importantly, these are tests of the Republicans in the Senate. It is not a coincidence that Trump dropped the Matt Gaetz announcement to basically break up John Thune's welcome party, his victory party, as having won as majority leader on the Senate side, on the Republican Senate side. It was like dropping a turd in his punch bowl at his party, basically, and sort of saying, okay, this is the most unacceptable, or among the most unacceptable people you could ever put in this job. Now, Mr. Thune, pass him, please. And unlike the leadership vote, which is a secret vote, Trump did not want John Thune to be leader. He would rather have had Rick Scott or John Cornyn. This is not a secret vote. This is a public vote. So now every Republican senator is facing the same dynamic that they faced every other time in Trump's political history, which is do what I say, or I will bring the wrath of MAGA down on you. And I think even in this negotiation, we're seeing go back and forth on the question of recess appointments. He is testing the Senate, and he's trying to make it clear that either you will be my rubber stamp willingly, or you will be my rubber stamp because I force you to be my rubber stamp. He's trying to take away advice and consent from the Senate effectively. And you saw John Thune last night with Bret Baier on Fox News, and he said, well, I'd really rather do it the normal way. We hope we can do it the normal way. But the last words out of his mouth were, nothing's off the table, meaning doing these things by recess appointment is on the table. And you can already see a very familiar dynamic where Donald Trump may end up incredibly, I mean, just mind-bogglingly, he might not be getting his way on these nominees.